Hey everybody, what's going on? You just heard the announcement from Sigma. I've actually had these two lenses in my hands for the past couple weeks. So we're going to talk about the all-new 35 1.4 DGDN L-mount and E-mount variant, but also when it comes to the E-mount, how does it compare to the 35 1.4 GM lens? I actually had both of them in hand before this recording, so we'll do a little bit of comparison with that as well. Let's talk about them. So the original 35 1.4 was a big lens for Sigma. It was a fan favorite, so Sigma did, of course, need to update it for the mirrorless lineup. And this 35 1.4 is like all their recent art lenses. It's fantastic. I mean, just to kind of give you a Cliff Notes version of this review, sharp, great colors coming out of this, great bokeh. This is a really nice lens, and for you videographers out there, it has less focus breathing than the 35 1.4 GM lens. But let's talk about what's inside of this. We got 15 elements, 11 groups. The weight of this is around 640 grams for the E-mount variant, and for the SL variant or L-mount variant, about 645. So where does that 5 grams come from? I don't know, but it's there according to the spec sheet. You've got 2 SLD elements in this. You've got a spherical element. You've got a lot of great glass in this, plus the front element is oil and water repellent, which is great. If you're out in the rain, you're out in some harsher terrains, and you want to get that shot, and you don't want your lens to get all gooked up with the water or whatever it might be, you are covered in this regard. Also, this is weather resistant, dust proof as well. You've got your aperture lock key, you've got your autofocus and manual focus switch, AFL button on it, and you can declick the aperture. So this is meant for also videographers as well as photographers. Now, I will talk about the L-mount and I'll show you some images in Lightroom in just a bit. Let's focus on the E-mount variant because I know a lot of you out there are gonna be thinking, okay, Bobby, the price is $899. The Sony 35 1.4 GM is around $1,400 US thereabouts, depending on your camera shop. Which lens should I go for? Of course, the Sigma is $500 cheaper, but is it worth it just to spend a little bit more on the Sony lens? Now, I actually had both of these lenses in my hand at the time. I had to send back the 35 1.4, unfortunately, with the FX3. You saw that video released recently on it. And I will tell you there are pros and cons. It's not as easy of a decision as I thought it was going to be. In terms of image quality, these two are very, very similar. I will show some comparisons in Lightroom in just a bit. That's why we're actually in Chinatown, is because when I did my 35 1.4 review, I did shoot a lot around this area. I wasn't able to come back with both lenses in hand, so I'm gonna take this lens and shoot around this area and try to get some comparable shots, but I did do some really boring side-by-side shots, which I'll show you in just a bit. I mean, nothing to write home about, but just to kind of give you a sense of the image quality and some of the differences. Some things, the keynotes that pointed out to me in terms of the image quality is, it is sharp. You do notice a little bit more green fringing in certain aspects on the Sigma versus the Sony, but it is actually not that bad. Bokeh is fantastic on both lenses. You're really not gonna be able to tell much of a difference on this. I think Sigma's done a fantastic job with this lens. It's really sharp. Great colors out of this, got a nice warm tone to it. It's not overly saturated, but just enough to where you see the colors pop, which I appreciate. We'll talk more images in just a bit when I go into Lightroom, because just talking to you right now, you're not gonna really understand it till we really, pixel peep a bit, as some of you like to do out there. And I like to do it, it's kind of fun too, but we'll show you that in Lightroom. But let's talk about the performance of these two lenses. The one thing I will say, of course, is the Sony is a smaller lens and it's slightly lighter weight. So if that is a big concern of you, then you might want to veer towards the Sony. Having said that though, using both lenses, yes, I noticed the Sigma is a little bit larger and a little bit longer, but it's not that big of a difference, so it's not a big deal for me. It really comes down to what I'm gonna use this lens for. Now, in terms of autofocusing speed, you do notice with third-party manufacturers versus Sony's lenses per se. The Sony is a little bit faster at the time of this recording. Now, I have given this feedback to Sigma. This is a pre-production lens, so there could be a firmware update before the launch, and they could speed up that autofocusing. But as of right now, it's just a hair slower than the Sony 35 1.4 GM lens. Now, in terms of the eye tracking, sometimes third-party lenses don't get the eye tracking as good as the Sony lenses or thereabouts. I will say it has been hit and miss with me. Sometimes it works great. Sometimes I need to power off the camera, turn it back on. Again, pre-production lens, so I'm not gonna fault Sigma for this. This can be fixed in a firmware update. Sigma is aware of my feedback and they are looking at it, so I have faith in them. The one thing I like about Sigma is they do listen to feedback. They really do. So in that regard, I'm not worried about it too much, but it's really about the image quality. Now, one of the pros to the Sigma over the Sony there's less focus breathing on the Sigma versus the Sony, which is great. However, the focus throw is a lot longer on the Sigma versus the Sony. So there's a trade-off. You know, it's really a battle between these two lenses in a lot of ways. But if you're a photographer mainly first and foremost, and I'm going to be using autofocus most of the time anyway. I just really want a good, high quality image coming out of this lens, and I don't want to spend a lot of money, then I would say go with the Sigma, because you're going to save $500. You're going to get very sharp, very great image quality coming out of this lens. You're going to be happy with it. But anyway, enough about me talking about this lens. Let's go into Lightroom now, and let me show you samples from the 35 1.4 GM lens versus the 35 1.4 DGDN lens from Sigma, as well as the L mount variant. Let's go to Lightroom and check them out. All right, guys, we're now in Lightroom taking a look at images from the Sigma 35 1.4 DGDN lens, also versus the Sony 35 1.4 GM lens, and then I will show you some L-mount variants as well that I shot on the Sigma FPL. But let's talk about the Sony versus the Sigma, because this is going to be a topic of conversation for a lot of buyers out there. Now, there is a big price difference, around $500 US thereabouts, depending on your camera shop or where you're going to purchase this lens at. But there are going to be some differences in the images that I think are worth noting. Case in point, let's look at my Darth Vader statue real quick here. This is of a pewter statue that I have, and I wanted to show you in terms of metallic objects and also bokeh. So I set this up where I had some lights in the background to give you an idea. Now this is with the Sony 35 1.4, and I was focusing right here on Darth Vader's face, and it is sharp. Very well controlled in terms of fringing, a little bit of green fringing right there, but ever so slight. But overall, it is really well controlled. The bokeh is nice, a bit circular here in the center. When you go to the edges, a little bit more cat's eye. Not a deal breaker. This is a very pleasing lens, as I talked about in my review. Now let's go to the Sigma. Now this is one thing you're going to notice with the Sigma versus the Sony. I'm going to show you right away so you know. You probably already see it right now. You're going to see more green fringing coming about on shiny objects right there, or anything with more contrast. And I don't know if this is because there's no lens profile in Lightroom as of yet, or this is just a characteristic of the lens. I think it's a characteristic of the lens because when you do see it in the L-mount variant, it is a little bit different, but it is something to take note of. The bokeh is very similar as well, but a little bit more halo right here, but it is circular towards the center and a little bit more cat's eye on the side. Now I didn't have this on a tripod, I was hand holding this, but it's something to take note of and just be aware of it. Now here is another sample shot I'll show you. This is with the FX3. I actually did a review on it. It's out there on YouTube right now. This is with the Sony 35 1.4. As you can tell, I was focusing right here, and it is very sharp, very minimal fringing, if any at all. But if I go to the Sigma, you're going to see that fringing coming about. It looks a bit red, green around this area. It is more pronounced. This is correctable again, but this is a difference I'm seeing between the two lenses. Besides that, unless I'm zooming in 400 or 200%, I really don't see much of a difference in terms of the bokeh style, in terms of the fall off. They are very similar in that regard. Anyway, let's go on just some other shots that I've taken with the 35 1.4 of a coffee cup here when I was in Chinatown. This is my friend Peter's hand here going to the bag. And just kind of showing you, this is more of a black and white, of course, just to kind of give you the texture and the fall off. And it's a beautiful lens for that. It's got a great bokeh. Now, we're not always going to shoot at 1.4, but if you want to shoot at 1.4, you're going to be very pleased with the fall off on this lens. Here's some building shots here that, of course, this has been edited. If you want to see what the color looks like before edit, then after edit, before edit, and after edit. Here's a couple of the shots here I'll show you of this stop sign here. This is before edit. This is after edit, before edit, and after edit. So this lens does give you a nice warm profile to it, which does make editing for me a little bit easier. But I do want to show you something that there's another characteristic of the Sigma lens that you do need to take note of, especially if you're going to be shooting any sort of buildings or architecture or anything with straight lines, is that there will be a little bit of bowing in the center, a little bit of the distortion happening here. This is, of course, before edit. Now I have adjusted this in Lightroom, and I've sort of straightened this all out. I could do a little bit more with that, but that is something that you will notice with this lens. This is at 1.4, by the way, so obviously if I stop down, this characteristic might be minimized a bit, but is something to look out for. Case in point, this is another shot here, 1.4, and this is after edit. Here's before edit and after edit. So I did adjust for the lines right here, a little bit more bowing. I could fix this a bit more, but it's just something to take note of. But overall, I'm really happy with this lens. The great fall off, the great detail. It's a very sharp lens, folks. I mean, Between the Sony and the Sigma in terms of sharpness, you're really splitting hairs. They're pretty much neck and neck. But one thing I'm going to give to the Sigma, this is quite interesting. And this is something that I've seen in a lot of their other lenses that I think is something to point out. If you want to shoot a subject against, let's say, a backlit area, and you're worrying about fringing in that regard, actually it's pretty well controlled. Case in point, I was shooting this durian and there was these lights from the canopy over here. Look how well controlled this is. And I'm really zoomed in on this, okay? This is very well controlled. I mean, you are going to see a little bit here of red, but right here in this area where I was focused on, it's fantastic. Let's show you some other images here. This canopy, I love the texture and I just love the gradient and the tones right here. This was shot at f8. And really, when you stop down this lens, you're going to really be happy with the sharpness and detail that it can pull out. This is, of course, with the A7R4. Here's another building shot here. And then let me just show you this picture of this cat. This was also shot at 1.4. And this is very, very sharp. Give it a moment to render. Of course, this is with the A7R4, so it is a larger file in Lightroom. But look at the detail in the eyes, the fur. This is really, really beautiful. I'm very happy with the performance of this lens in that regard. Now let me show you something from the L mount variant here on the Sigma FPL. Now we're just shooting this waist bin, of course, with, I love the shadow and the light hitting this tiger beer logo here and then kind of cascading over this bin. This has been edited. This is before edit. This is after edit, before edit, and after edit. By the way, the colors out of the Sigma FPL are fantastic shooting raw. So it's really, really nice out of the camera system. But again, very sharp with Sigma lens on the Sigma body, and I'm not really seeing that fringing as much as I saw on the Sony. Let me show you another example of what I'm talking about here. Here is the lock on a door here. I love this red door. It's just vibrant. Of course, this has been edited a bit. This is the after edit and this is before edit. But let's just zoom in on the door real quick here, this door lock. And I'm not seeing much of the fringing here. So based on my general observations thus far, this could be a Sony camera situation with the E mount where the L mount is well controlled, especially with the Sigma camera, or it could be a profile on the camera. I don't know, but I'm noticing a difference in terms of how the fringing is on metallic objects from the L mount to the E mount variant. But if I move over to this area as well, you will see a little bit happening here in this area. So it's a little bit less than the Sony, but it can show up here and there. So just be wary of that, but easily correctable. But overall, just the tonality of this lens is really, really nice. The sharpness, I'm very, very happy with it. Now, let's go back to the review. So as we saw in Lightroom, the images coming out of the Sigma lens are really, really good compared to the Sony. This is a very tough call for a lot of you out there. It just depends on your needs and, of course, your budget. Let's talk about the L mount variant here on the Sigma FPL for a moment, because this is where it gets a little bit more interesting for me. Because in the L mount, you really have very limited lenses. Of course, you have the 35f2 SL Summicron from Leica, which is a phenomenal lens. That is probably one of my favorite 35mm autofocusing lenses I've ever used to date. However, it does come at a very considerable cost. Then, of course, then you have the Sigma, the I series 35f2, and then, of course, now you have the 35-1.4 and the 35-1.2 Art series lens from Sigma. But the 35-1.4, I think, is going to be a lens a lot of you will gravitate towards. A, because of the price point, and B, it just, I mean, size-wise, it is smaller than the 35-1.2 Sigma, and it's faster autofocusing, as well as the image quality is just really, really good. And, you know, this has been updated. This is the 2021 version. Of course, now from 2019 to 2021, Sigma has done some improvements on these lenses. And that's not to say that the 35-1.2 is a bad lens. It is not. It's a fantastic lens. But I would venture to say, for a lot of you out there that are getting more into hybrid, shooting and video, this might be the lens to go for. The 35f2 to me was a phenomenal lens in terms of image quality. I love the design, the compact size. And for f2, that's fine for most people out there. But I think for video, I think this might be where you want to go with. I think that the video on this was a little bit better than the 35f2 in my personal testing. Now, to each their own on this, everyone's going to shoot a little bit differently. We don't all shoot the same. But I do think that this is a very viable option for you out there. And the image quality coming out of this lens does complement, if you're, let's say, a Leica SL2, SL2S user, and you do have some SL Summicrons or even a Vario Elmar lens out there, this is going to complement that image quality very, very nicely. Now, it has all the same specs as the Sony internally on it, so I don't want to go through all that again, but I do think this is a very great option to look at if you're looking for a solid 35-1.4 lens in the L mount alliance. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the all-new Sigma 35-1.4 DGDN lens. I do like this lens. I think it's gonna be a great option for a lot of people out there. Compared to the Sony, again, it's up to budget and depending on how you shoot. And for you L mount users out there, for $899 US, this is a very good option, especially for you Leica shooters out there. If you are okay with venturing outside of the red dot, I think you're gonna really enjoy this lens. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Anything I might have missed, let me know and I'll try to answer that in the comments. With that, stay safe, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and I will chat to you soon. Take care.